On the North Lishan Road, east of Lingtong District, Xi'an City, Shanxi Province, China, there is a huge mountain in the distance. For more than 2,000 years, the locals have been very secretive about this mountain, but no one knows the secrets within. This is China's most mysterious imperial mausoleum, the Mausoleum of Qing Shi Huang. At present, there are only a handful of imperial tombs in Chinese history that have not been successfully looted. Among them are Qianling Mausoleum, where Emperor Gaozong of Tang and Empress Wu Zetian are buried together, Zhaoling Mausoleum of Emperor Taizong of Tang, Xiaoling Mausoleum of Mingzhu Yunzheng, Changling Mausoleum of Mingzhu Di, Xiaoling Mausoleum of Qing Shunzhu, Mausoleum of Qing Shi Huang, and so on. Tomb robbing was most rampant during periods of war or dynasty change, especially during the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms, late Tang dynasty, late Qing dynasty, and early Ming dynasty. Although these well-preserved imperial tombs have also been robbed many times, the main underground palaces are well preserved. They have blocked waves of tomb robbers due to terrain structure and other reasons. Before 1996, most people believed that the mausoleum of Qing Shi Huang had been robbed, because such a large mausoleum has experienced countless wars and uprisings in history, and it is almost impossible that it has not been robbed. In addition, the Book of Han Li Jai biography recorded that Qing Shi Huang's gold-wrapped jade box was broken by Xiang Yu and the treasures were taken. Therefore, many people believe that the Qing mausoleum had been robbed by Xiang Yu a long time ago. In order to find out whether the mausoleum of Qing Shi Huang was robbed, China launched a 863 plan, using advanced geological exploration methods. A large number of people were mobilized to conduct a detailed investigation of the mausoleum of Qi Shi Huang. In the end, it was concluded that the main structure of the mound and the underground palace of the mausoleum of Qing Shi Huang were well preserved and had not been looted. It also confirmed the truth of the Qing mausoleum was made of mercury as rivers and seas, recorded in the records of the Grand Historian, solving a mystery of more than 2,000 years. So what other amazing discoveries were made during this investigation? Why did Xiang Yu burn down the Qing dynasty palace but not loot the mausoleum of Qing Shi Huang? More than 100 tomb robbery holes were found in the Qing mausoleum, but why did not a single tomb robbery succeed? Today, let's talk about the Qingling 863 plan, trying to understand the real truth of the Qingling exploration. Before talking about the 863 plan, let's first understand the background. The 1980s was the peak of the Cold War. Since the Soviet Union had more nuclear warheads than the United States, in order to cope with the crisis, the United States decided to establish an effective anti-missile system to ensure the survivability of its strategic nuclear forces. In 1983, President Reagan proposed a Star Wars plan to vigorously develop space laser weapons and missile defense systems. In this process, the high-tech in the United States developed rapidly. The Soviet Union was not to be outdone and immediately jointly formulated a comprehensive outline for scientific and technological progress with Eastern European countries. For a time, the wave of high technology swept the world. China at that time was no exception. On March 3, 1986, 4 senior Chinese scientists jointly submitted a report to the central government, proposing to keep up with the situation and vigorously develop high technology. After several months of repeated discussions, the Chinese government issued the outline of the high-tech research and development plan in November 1986. The direction of vigorously developing high technology was determined. Because the outline was proposed in March of the same year, this plan was also called the 863 Plan. However, the 863 Plan did not set up the tomb archaeology at the beginning. So why was Qingling also included in the 863 Plan? This is actually due to the joint exploration project of Qingling by China and Germany in 1996. With the introduction and development of various new technologies of the 863 Plan, in the 1990s, the Chinese archaeological community also realized that, if the underground tombs were to be non-destructively detected, the most advanced technical support was necessary, especially for the major project of the Qin Shi Huang Mausoleum. Therefore, some high-tech technologies originally used for geological military remote sensing aerial detection were introduced into the archaeological field. At that time, Germany was in a leading position in this part of technology. In 1996, the Chinese Cultural Relics Department and the Technical University of Munich in Germany officially launched the Qingling Joint Scientific Expedition Project, using German geophysical detection technology, such as geological radar, magnetometers and gravity detectors, to conduct preliminary exploration of the surface and underground structure of the Qingling Mausoleum. It was also the first milestone project in the history of Chinese archaeology to introduce international high-tech forces for non-destructive exploration of major imperial tombs. The biggest achievement of this exploration is to verify the historical description of using mercury as rivers and seas, and injecting them into the camera. The first sentence is astronomy. The second sentence is geography recorded in the records of the Grand Historian. This passage clearly records that a large amount of mercury was used in the underground palace of the Qi Shi Huang Mausoleum to simulate the rivers and seas in nature, and it was made to flow through mechanical devices to construct a grand astronomical and geographical landscape. In fact, as early as the 1980s, the Chinese geological and archaeological team tried to detect abnormal mercury elements in the Qingling terroir through geochemical sampling. However, due to the technical limitations at the time, the detection depth and accuracy were not high, and no definite conclusion was drawn. This time, the Sino-German joint exploration used more sophisticated instruments and found that the average mercury gas concentration in the center of the burial mound exceeded that of conventional land by dozens of times, suggesting that there is, indeed, a large amount of mercury underground, and confirmed that the abnormal mercury concentration is mainly concentrated in the area directly below the burial mound, which is where the underground palace is located. After further measurement and analysis, it was found that the area of the arch abnormal area is about 12,000 square meters, and the distribution of the arch shows a northeast to southwest direction, which is very likely to correspond to the symbolic layout of the Yellow River and the Yangtze River. All these results prove that the mercury in the underground palace is not fictional, which leads to a very interesting and thought-provoking question. Why can Sima Qian's records of the Grand Historian record such highly confidential information as mercury in the underground palace? We know that the internal structure of Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum was an absolute secret more than 2,000 years ago. Even many people who built the mausoleum were killed after the construction of the mausoleum was completed. To this day, the hastily buried tombs of craftsmen can still be found on the west side of the Qi Mausoleum. The records of the Grand Historian records that the yellow intestines were made into a coffin, and the crossbows were used as hands. The craftsmen made strange and precious tools and hid them in the underground palace. After they were hidden, the craftsmen were ordered to be killed and not to be leaked. This means that after the death of Qin Shi Huang, the craftsmen who participated in the construction of the mausoleum were secretly killed by Qin Ershi in order to prevent the structure, mechanisms, and treasures of the mausoleum from being leaked to protect the safety of the mausoleum. The records of the Grand Historian also records that there was an empty door in the wall and a strange door outside, which imprisoned the craftsmen and prevented them from coming out again. It means that the tomb passage of Qin Shi Huang has 3 doors. After Qin Shi Huang was buried, a group of craftsmen closed the inner and middle doors. Before they came out, Qin Ershi ordered the closure of the outermost door of the tomb passage, trapping these craftsmen to death in the tomb passage. These craftsmen should have known the mechanism of the tomb passage and were silenced. Sima Qian was a historian of the Western Han Dynasty. When he wrote the records of the Grand Historian, more than 100 years had passed since the construction of the Qin Mausoleum was completed. How did he know such top-secret information in the Qin Mausoleum? Although the construction of the Qin Shi Huang Mausoleum was huge and strictly confidential, the entire project lasted 39 years and mobilized 700,000 to 800,000 people. It was impossible for Qin Ershi to kill all 800,000 people, as that would surely cause resistance. Therefore, he would only kill the craftsmen who knew the most core secrets of the Qin Mausoleum. There was no need to kill the large number of craftsmen who were engaged in the transportation and construction of the periphery, as well as the production of funerary objects. However, if a second person knew anything, it was actually equivalent to everyone knowing it. The large amount of mercury in the underground palace could not have been kept secret during the production and transportation process. Therefore, as time went by, the fact that the underground palace was filled with mercury quickly spread among the craftsmen. They just kept it a secret while they were working, but their families and friends would definitely know more or less when they were resting. So this secret had long been circulated among the people, and Sima Qian could also obtain this information by visiting and investigating the descendants of these surviving craftsmen. Sima Qian was the Grand Historian and a court minister who wrote history books and supervised national classics, so he had the right to access the core government documents, such as historical materials or official secret records left over from the Qing dynasty, and perhaps some archives containing the content of the construction of the mausoleum. Through these cross-comparisons, Sima Qian finally wrote down such spectacular historical materials as mercury is the rivers and seas. With the technical accumulation of this Sino-German cooperation, China officially included the exploration of Qinling Mountains in the National 863 Plan, with Germany providing core equipment and technical support. China combined domestic technology with the application level to jointly carry out detection using remote sensing, surveying and mapping, aerial photography, geophysical terrain radar, and other advanced technologies to conduct a comprehensive survey of Qinling Mountains. The Qin Shi Huang Mausoleum, as the largest and most complex imperial mausoleum in Chinese history, has been strictly prohibited from excavation by China. This is mainly due to the lessons learned from Guo Morwo's proposal to excavate Dingling in 1956. Therefore, the 863 research team needs to use the most advanced geological technology to explore the structure of the mausoleum and avoid destructive excavation. Unexpectedly, the 863 project made a major discovery at the beginning. We know that the ancient royal mausoleums would use huge earth mounds, that is, a giant tomb. The earth mound is the most intuitive symbol of the imperial mausoleum. Its size and shape reflect the rank and dignity of the emperor. In addition to its symbolic significance, it is also practical. The burial mounds are built in layers with rammed earth. First of all, the filling soil is not loose pure soil, but a mixture of sand and clay to increase the density. One layer of soil is rammed and then another layer is laid. The burial mound in this way has a strong structure and is waterproof, collapse-proof and theft-proof. The burial mounds in large imperial tombs require thousands of people to tamp continuously for several months or even years. This alone makes it impossible for ordinary tomb robbers to enter. The archaeological team discovered that the original height of the burial mound of the Qin Shi Huang Mausoleum was 115 meters. Now it may have dropped to 76 meters due to weathering or incomplete construction, but it is still the highest and largest artificial burial mound in Chinese history, and there are obvious signs of tamping, at least more than 100 layers, so the burial mound is to protect the earth. The Qin Mausoleum is a kind of ground facility of the Qin Mausoleum, which should be a pure earth pile. However, the 863 archaeological team used geophysical exploration technology to discover a huge building inside the earth pile. This is a phenomenon that has never been seen in the earth piles of all the emperors' tombs in China. That is to say, before 2002, we knew nothing about the existence of buildings in the Qin Mausoleum. Finally, through ground-penetrating radar, it was discovered that the giant building in the earth pile is a stepped tower building, built with rammed earth and stone slabs, with no roof and a hollow in the middle that goes directly underground. There is no doubt that the underground is where the underground palace is located. The function of this building may be to reinforce the earth. More importantly, this building has a total of 9 floors. If you look from a distance, it looks like a 9-level high-rise building. Why 9 floors? Because the worship of the number 9 began in the pre-Qing cultural period. In the Book of Changes, 9 is the ultimate Yang number. Qin Shi Huang called himself the Supreme Lord, wore a 9-dragon robe and built a 9-story palace. Therefore, after Qin Shi Huang's death, a 9-story building was to be built, which would not only protect his mausoleum, but also allow his soul to climb high and see far when he travels. There is a saying that the underground palace of the Qin Mausoleum is not directly below the burial mound, but at the foot of Mount Li, on the south side of the burial mound. There is a passage connecting them. There is also a local legend that on rainy days, strange noises can be heard in the tunnel. These are the ghost soldiers of Qin Shi Huang used to protect his mausoleum. And this saying has a basis. There is a book of Han Jiuyi, in the Eastern Han Dynasty, that describes the emperor's daily life and official system. It wrote about Li Si's report on the construction of the Qin Mausoleum. It is said that the foundation of the Qin Mausoleum has been dug very deep. It may have encountered a rock layer that cannot be dug or burned. It is like coming to another world. So Qin Shi Huang ordered that the underground palace be moved to the side by 300 zheng. 1 zheng in the Qin dynasty was 2.3 meters, which means it was moved 690 meters, which is almost in Mount Li. Did Qin Shi Huang really not follow the rules or place the real underground palace in Mount Li for the sake of anti-theft? The experts of the 863 project used transient electromagnetic instruments to accurately measure the structure under the mound and found that there was a huge space 33 meters underground, about 260 meters long and 160 meters wide, with a total area of 41,600 square meters, equivalent to the area of 6 standard football fields. This is the location of the underground palace. After that, the underground around the Qing Mausoleum was telemetered from east to west, and no underground space or passage was found, which shows that the legend is just a legend, and the underground palace of the Qing Mausoleum is undoubtedly under the mound. There is no so-called second underground palace, so what does the 300 feet to the side mean? Because no matter where you dig 700 meters to the side from any position of the underground palace, it is far beyond the scope of the underground palace. If this is not a passage, what is it? Later, experts believed that the 300 feet here did not mean digging 700 meters to the side, but expanding the scope by 300 feet. That is to say, Li Su reported to Qing Shi Huang that the depth of the underground palace had reached the extreme and could not be deeper. Qing Shi Huang replied that the scope around the underground palace should be expanded by another 300 feet. This well explains the above problem. Of course, this is just speculation. The 863 project found that the Qing Mausoleum only had 2 tomb passages, one in the east and one in the west. The larger tomb passage in the east was probably for placing large burial objects, while the smaller tomb passage in the west was probably for craftsmen to enter and exit. There is a circle of drainage channels around the underground palace to drain groundwater. This hexagonal water channel structure can still be found in Maojia village next to the Qing Mausoleum today. These water channel structures can still be used more than 2,000 years later, which shows how high the construction specifications of the mausoleum were at that time. The records of the Grand Historian also mentioned that the Qing Mausoleum penetrated 3 springs, and the coffin was built in the same way below. This means that the Qing Mausoleum was dug very deep and penetrated 3 underground waters. In order to solve the problem of groundwater infiltration, the designers of the Qing Mausoleum diverted the river outside the Qing Mausoleum at the beginning, which was equivalent to a water conservancy project. A waterproof wall with a circumference of 1.7 kilometers was also built around the underground palace. It is composed of 17 meters thick Qinggao mud and 21 meters thick loess, forming a nearly 40-meter thick natural waterproof wall, which effectively blocks the infiltration of groundwater and protects the underground palace from flooding. Therefore, the underground palace of the Qing Mausoleum has been well preserved to this day. We know that since the Warring States period, a coffin burial system exclusively for the emperor has begun, which is Huangchang Tichou. Huangchang refers to unpeeled cypress, which is solid and yellow like intestines. It is the material used to make the outer periphery of the coffin. And Tichou refers to arranging these cypresses like tiles in a square structure, with the coffin placed in the innermost. Therefore, the imperial Tichou are all made of wood. When the experts of 863 used Luoyang shovels and ropes to explore and sample the underground of the fief, they found stone slabs on the top of the underground palace and the east side of the tomb passage, and made a sound of kang kang kang. The sampling showed that these were bluestones near Xiangyang, Shenxi. It is speculated that the top and sides of the underground palace should be capped with huge stones, which wrapped the underground palace layer by layer. This form is unprecedented, let alone unprecedented. The detection shows that the height of the underground palace is 15 meters, which is equivalent to the height of a 5-story building. For such a large space, how is the span problem solved? Although the Qing Mausoleum has not yet been officially excavated, scholars based on ancient literature speculate that the Qin Mausoleum may have adopted a double-eave structure, similar to that of ancient large palaces, forming a load-bearing system. Similar to an arch, and then using rammed earth and stone slabs to protect the top of such an underground palace, it can reduce the pressure of the top earth pile. However, for a 40,000 square meter underground palace without reinforced concrete and pillar support, it is simply impossible to rely on wooden beams to bear millions of tons of earth piles. Therefore, some scholars speculate that the underground palace may be divided into multiple independent spaces, similar to the structure of a multi-treasure box, with each space top independently bearing the load to reduce the span so that different funerary objects can be placed in each grid. This statement is not groundless. In 1978, a tomb of Zheng Houyi from the Warring States period was excavated. This tomb is different from any other tombs discovered in China before. Previous tombs all adopted a vertical shaft structure, and the underground palace had only one space buried deep underground. But the Zheng Houyi tomb divided the tomb into several grids, including a treasure room, a weapons room, and a ritual room. This new concept had already appeared in the Warring States period, and the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang was likely to carry it forward. What we can be sure of about the interior of the underground palace is the layout of Mercury, but Sima Qian's the upper sentence is astronomy, and the lower sentence is geography, also refers to the fact that there are astronomical constellations on the top of the Qin Mausoleum underground palace, and this is likely to be true like Mercury, but how to achieve this kind of landscape? If it is just a simple painting, it will underestimate Qin Shi Huang's pattern. Some scholars have inferred that gems and fluorescent minerals were used on the top of the underground palace to display the 28 constellations. Fluorescent minerals are the so-called nightshades. After being polished, the pearl ore can glow in dim light. Against the backdrop of the mermaid oil eternal lamps in the underground palace, the top must be dotted with stars and extremely spectacular. This is an art installation that is more than 2,000 years earlier than the Rolls-Royce Starry Sky ceiling. In fact, the presence of Mercury in the Qin Mausoleum underground palace is not the first. Mercury was found in the tombs of the King of Qi and the King of Wu in the spring and autumn period and the Warring States period. However, the function of these mercury is to prevent corrosion rather than theft. When it comes to the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang, he creatively placed a large amount of mercury in the form of rivers, lakes, and seas in the underground palace, which not only can prevent corrosion, but also can prevent theft, and it has a strong symbolic significance. Then the question is, how much mercury is there in the underground palace? According to the detection data of the 863 plan, the area of the Qin Mausoleum underground palace is 41,600 square meters. If it is covered with mercury to a depth of 10 centimeters, the total amount of mercury required is 56,351 tons. Obviously, this is an astronomical figure, but Sima Qian's records of the Grand Historian also said that the Qin Mausoleum is made of mercury as rivers and seas, that is, the Yellow River and Yangtze River simulate the Chinese territory, rather than covering the underground palace. But even so, experts estimate that the mercury required for the Qin Mausoleum underground palace is 80 to 100 tons. Only in this way can it be possible to volatilize for more than 2,000 years, and the current detection still has extremely high mercury content. Even if there are only 100 tons of mercury, it is an astronomical figure at the time. Where did all this mercury come from? Mercury in ancient China was called Dan because mercury is one of the important raw materials of Dan. It is said that mercury can cure diseases, prevent pregnancy and abortion, and even keep youth forever. A small amount of mercury can indeed cure diseases such as vitiligo, and it also has the effect of inducing abortion, so everyone thinks mercury is a panacea, because the mercury content in each pill is not high, and taking 1 or 2 pills will not kill you, so it is very popular among princes and nobles. Mercury is obtained by heating the ore called cinnabar. The scientific name of cinnabar is mercuric sulfide. During the spring and autumn period and the Warring States period, Chinese alchemists had already mastered the method of heating mercury sulfide to obtain mercury. The annual output of mercury in the Warring States period was 1 ton, but it took 100 years to reach the hundreds of tons in the underground palace of the Qing Mausoleum. You must know that the construction of the Qing Mausoleum took nearly 40 years. If large-scale labor is concentrated on refining across the country, it should not be difficult to increase the annual output to 2 to 3 tons, so hundreds of tons of mercury are nothing rare. We currently know nothing about the burial objects in the underground palace of the Qing Mausoleum, but we can reasonably speculate the burial system inside the underground palace based on the excavated Qing Mausoleum burial pits such as the Terracotta Warriors and Horses Pit, the Bronze Chariot and Horses Pit, the 100 Plays Terracotta Warriors Pit, and the Waterfowl Pit, because these burial pits surrounding the mound reflect the miniature imperial structure in the underground palace to some extent. First of all, the Terracotta Warriors and Horses, this military system belonging to the Qing Mausoleum, shows the complete military structure of the Qing dynasty at that time, including infantry, cavalry, chariots, and commanders, but due to the consideration of the progress of the project, these terracotta warriors and horses are all made of clay, and only the chariots are made of bronze, because although bronze in the Qing dynasty was not the most precious metal, it was very important. The military and rituals use metal to make ritual vessels and weapons, but if bronze is used to make more than 8,000 terracotta warriors and horses, the time spent may not be able to keep up with the progress of the Qing Mausoleum, and finally clay was used. Therefore, we can speculate that the terracotta warriors and horses in the underground palace may all be made of bronze, which is more difficult and has higher craftsmanship. For example, the terracotta warriors and horses on the bronze chariot are made of bronze. But the number of bronze terracotta warriors in the underground palace may be limited, and they are equipped with weapons. If you look closely at the terracotta warriors, you will find that all the terracotta warriors have their hands in a grasping position, which is obviously to hold weapons. However, none of the more than 8,000 terracotta warriors unearthed so far has weapons in their hands. The most common saying now is that these weapons were taken away by Xiang Yu when he destroyed the terracotta warriors at that time, but this statement is actually untenable because the terracotta warriors at that time were also buried deep underground, and Xiang Yu could not have known how large the scale was. He did destroy a lot of terracotta warriors, but it is basically impossible to dig out all the terracotta warriors and take away their weapons. Another point is that the terracotta warriors are not without unearthed weapons. More than 10,000 bronze weapons have been unearthed so far, but none of them are in the hands of the terracotta warriors. They are all scattered in the corners of the terracotta warrior pit. Why didn't Xiang Yu take these weapons but only the ones in his hands? Obviously, this is unreasonable. In addition, most of the more than 10,000 weapons are crossbows and arrowheads, which are used by archery troops, while melee weapons such as swords, halberds, and spears are rare. So there is a bold and reasonable speculation that at the end of the Qing dynasty, the rebels were surging and almost reached Xianyang City. General Zhang Han urgently wrote to Qin II to ask him to pardon the prisoners who built the Qing Mausoleum and organize them to fight against the rebels. Finally, Qin II agreed. And these hundreds of thousands of prisoners who built the mausoleum were organized by Sangmang, so they must be short of weapons. They used all the melee weapons originally equipped for the terracotta warriors. We know that any project has a process. The terracotta warriors will be equipped with weapons only after they are completed. At this time, before they had time to install them, they were used by the prisoners who built the mausoleum organized by Zhang Han, and most of them were melee weapons, while bows and crossbows were not used, because in the Qing dynasty army the bow and arrow troops were technical arms and not everyone could be. They were not the main force of the frontal charge, but used as a long-range strike. These Lishan prisoners were not regular troops, so they did not use arrows and crossbows. After that, the remaining arrows and crossbows were hastily placed in the corner of the terracotta warriors and horses' pit, so today we can't see any weapons in the hands of the terracotta warriors and horses. The bronze terracotta warriors in the underground palace will not only be more exquisite, but they will definitely have weapons in their hands. The second type of burial objects in the underground palace should be the palace garden ecosystem. For example, in 2000, a bronze waterfowl pit was discovered 1.5 kilometers away from the Qing Mausoleum. 46 large bronze waterfowl were unearthed in this burial pit, including bronze swans, cranes, and wild geese. They were very exquisitely made, and the craftsmanship came from the Mesopotamian basin in Iraq. This shows that there was already communication with these areas at that time. According to the specifications of the burial objects in the underground palace, they must be higher than those in the burial pit. It is speculated that the palace garden ecosystem in the underground palace is likely to use gold to make these waterfowl. The third type is the ritual system. Historical records show that Qin Shi Huang was a person who attached great importance to court rituals and music. It is speculated that he had a special liking for music. After his death, he must have placed a large number of entertainment and ritual music burial objects in the underground palace. It is speculated that there will be 100-play terracotta pit in the underground palace to simulate the court scene of music, singing, and dancing. The fourth category is the belief system. Qin Shi Huang believed in the mandate of heaven and thought he was the supreme ruler. So there must be a large number of related burial objects in the underground palace, such as the nine-dragon sword, the jade seal, elixirs, and other burial objects that we may not be able to imagine. The disclosure of these objects will surely shock the world. In 247 BC, when Yingzheng was in power in the Qing state, he was only 13 years old. In that year, his mausoleum began to be built. It was not until 208 BC, 2 years after Yingzheng's death, that the Qin Mausoleum was completed. At that time, no one knew that Yingzheng could unify the six kingdoms, and no one knew how long he could live. Who set the scale of the Qi Mausoleum? Was it huge from the beginning? If Yingzheng was just a Jing king, the specifications of the mausoleum would not be what they are today. Obviously, this is a question that few people discuss. There are a lot of materials, and no one has mentioned this, but we can analyze it based on historical materials. According to the records in the Han Zhouyi, Prime Minister Li Su was responsible for supervising the construction of the Qin Mausoleum at that time. He led a team of 720,000 prisoners and criminals to dig the foundation very deep. So what year was this? Li Su was a Chu native who entered Qin in 247 BC and became an advisor to Qin Shi Huang. At that time, there were other advisors from the Six Kingdoms. In the 10th year of Qin Wangjing, that is, the 237th BC, Qin Wangjing ordered the expulsion of Li Su, one of the advisors from the Six Kingdoms. Later, Li Su wrote a letter to the emperor, saying that Qin would not be strong without the guest. He also argued the pros and cons of the goal of great unification, and explained the importance of using guest officials to strengthen the country. Finally, he moved Qin Wangjing to withdraw his order to expel the guest, and began to use Li Su. After Qin unified the Six Kingdoms, Li Su participated in and presided over various affairs related to the emperor. The most important one was to supervise the construction of the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang. It is speculated that this year was after Qin destroyed the Six Kingdoms and unified them, which should be in 221 BC. At this time, 26 years had passed since the construction of the previous Qinhuang Mausoleum. It is very likely that the mausoleum has been repaired, but the specifications must be those of the Qinhuang. At this time, Qin Shi Huang was obviously dissatisfied with the specifications of the mausoleum, so he asked Li Su to expand it. This is why the above-mentioned records in the Han Zhouyi show that the mausoleum was excavated again and expanded. Moreover, these 720,000 people were recruited only after Qin unified the Six Kingdoms. It was impossible to have so many people before. At that time, the population of Qin was 4 to 5 million, and the army was nearly 1 million. General Wang Jian attacked Chu and led 600,000 Qin troops. The 1 million army logistics support personnel had to be at least twice as many, so the population of Qin was only 2 million. Most of them were women, children, the elderly, the weak, the sick, and the disabled. It was impossible to gather 720,000 strong laborers to repair the mausoleum. Now, it can be seen from the burial pits of the Qin Mausoleum that many craftsmen came from the Six Kingdoms, which shows that these 720,000 people were criminal captives and laborers pulled in after the unification of the Six Kingdoms. Therefore, the current mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang was rebuilt after Qin unified the Six Kingdoms. Such a scale is the pattern and height that Qin Shi Huang achieved after he unified the Six Kingdoms. So did Qin Shi Huang go to the mausoleum to check during the construction of the Qin Mausoleum? There is no record of this at present, but we can infer that Qin Shi Huang must have inspected and guided the construction of the mausoleum many times during its construction. The design of the upper astronomy and lower geography in the underground palace is likely to be derived from Qin Shi Huang's ideas. If there is anyone in history who can be linked to the excavation of the Qin Mausoleum, it is Huang Chao, Shi Hu, and Xiang Yu. We know that among the resistance forces at the end of the Qing dynasty, Liu Bang was the first to enter Xiangyang city. The Qin king Ziying in the city knew that the situation was hopeless, so he personally surrendered to Liu Bang and presented the imperial seal. Therefore, Liu Bang did not burn and destroy Xiangyang city, but instead ordered the protection of the people in the city, which was also a consideration to appease the people and showed his superb political mind. But after Liu Bang left, Xiang Yu's army arrived. His grandfather Xiang Yan was a famous general of the state of Chu. During the Qing attack on Chu, he was defeated by the Qing general Wang Jin and committed suicide. Therefore, Xiang Yu and the Qing state had a feud. After he entered Xianyang, he set a big fire and burned the palace in the city to ashes. The records of the grand historian Xiang Yu recorded that Xiang Yu burned the Qing palace for 3 months. After that, Xiang Yu killed the Qing king Ziying in order to eradicate the roots and slaughtered the people of Xianyang. At this time, according to Xiang Yu's bloodiness, he was likely to destroy the mausoleum of Qi Shi Huang. The Water Classic notes clearly pointed out that after Xiang Yu entered Henggu Pass, he used 300,000 people to rob the tomb and failed to transport it in 30 days. The stolen bronze and other metal items were sold to tomb robbers outside the pass. It is not said here which tomb it is, but it can only be the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang if it has not been transported in 30 days. However, according to the 863 archaeological plan, the underground palace of the Qin mausoleum has not been destroyed, which is inconsistent with the records. However, experts found a lot of traces of burning near the terracotta warriors in the Qin mausoleum, and there were obvious signs of slashing on the terracotta warriors. Through these findings, experts concluded that Xiang Yu destroyed the terracotta warriors. In the records of the Grand Historian, it is also recorded that Xiang Yu destroyed many tombs of the pre-Qing dynasty after burning the Qing dynasty palace, but he did not touch the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang. Therefore, combined with the archaeological results of the 863 project, and the records of historical materials, it can be concluded that Xiang Yu burned the Xianyang city and destroyed the tombs of the pre-Qing dynasty on a large scale. Xiang Yu did come to the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang. He robbed all the ground palaces of the Qin mausoleum and burned them down. That is why the ground buildings of the Qin mausoleum are not visible now. He also excavated and destroyed some burial pits, such as the terracotta warriors. When Xiang Yu was preparing to rob the underground palace of the Qin Shi Huang mausoleum, he might have given up the plan to rob the underground palace of the Qin mausoleum because he could not find the tomb passage and the war situation was urgent at the time, and he had to deal with the treacherous Liu Bang. Because according to the later discoveries of Qin mausoleum archaeologists, the burned terracotta warriors were mainly distributed near the corridors and tunnels, which shows that Xiang Yu tried to find the entrance to the tomb but failed because the Qin mausoleum underground palace was built very deep and the entrance was hidden very cleverly. Did no one in the past dynasties rob the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang? Of course not. Experts from the 863 project found that there were more than 100 robbery holes in the Qin mausoleum throughout the dynasties, most of which were in the late Tang dynasty. The deepest robbery hole was 9 meters deep, which was dug from the mound, and the depth from the underground palace was 7 to 80 meters. Moreover, this robbery hole was completely in the wrong position. Even if it continued, it would not be possible to hit the tomb passage. This is why the tomb robber gave up. With the scale and solidity of the Qin Shi Huang mausoleum, the civilian tomb robbers were helpless. Although the warlord Sun Lianzhong was stationed in Xi'an during the Republic of China, he also had the idea of robbing the Qin mausoleum, but in the end he gave up because he was afraid of the impact. There is also a more direct proof that the underground palace of the Qin mausoleum has not been robbed. If the underground palace was really robbed at some stage in history, even if there was only a small robbery hole, the mercury would evaporate with the robbery hole in more than 2,000 years. The current detection results show that the mercury content under the mound is still very alarming, which means that the underground palace is well preserved and extremely safe. Everyone must be concerned about the question of when the Qin Shi Huang Mausoleum will be excavated, because once the Qin Mausoleum is excavated, it will definitely be the largest archaeological discovery in history, and the treasures and secrets in it will shock the world. Although everyone is curious, it seems impossible to excavate the Qin Mausoleum. In 1994, the State Administration of Cultural Heritage clearly proposed a policy of not actively excavating the Qin Mausoleum itself. The non-active here means that the Qin Mausoleum will not be excavated unless it encounters internal collapse or damage. The scope includes the mound and the underground palace, but the burial pits around the Qin Mausoleum are not within this scope. In 2003, China promulgated the regulations for the implementation of the Cultural Relics Protection Law, emphasizing that archaeological excavations of cultural relics should be mainly rescue excavations, and major projects need to be approved. However, in many public reiterations after 2005, the Qin Mausoleum underground palace does not have the conditions for excavation at this stage, so China's current attitude towards the Qin Mausoleum is to protect it in situ. It is emphasized that future generations also have the right to study and know. A considerable number of scholars also believe that the Qin Mausoleum should remain untouched for 1,000 years as a permanent object of research and protection. Therefore, as long as China still exists and is not invaded by other countries, the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang will not be excavated. Because this mausoleum symbolizes China's dragon veins and is also a precious historical heritage left to future generations, when technology matures in the future, it is completely possible to conduct non-destructive archaeological excavations on the mausoleum through high technology, such as perspective telemetry, micro-robots, VR imaging, etc., which can restore a real mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang for us, and there is no need to excavate it. The Qin dynasty was the first unified dynasty in Chinese history. In just over a decade, it completed the integration of institutional centralization and national territory. The ambition and pattern of Qin Shi Huang were magnified to the extreme in human individuals, but the Qin dynasty perished only 3 years after his death. The reason was that the Qin dynasty's institutional design and ruling methods were unreasonable, the punishments were too harsh, and the people were generally afraid and hated. The centralization was too strong and the local areas were unbalanced. There were constant wars and labor, and the people had no time to recuperate. In the final analysis, it ignored the hearts and minds of the people. It can be said that it won the world, but lost the hearts of the people. Therefore, any grand ideal cannot be separated from the support of the people. Now the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang looks like a huge historical monument, constantly urging the country to move forward along the right path. I hope that 10,000 years later, the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang can still stand in its original place in its complete form.